Jack turned on the radio to break the silence, but the music didn't help ease his sense of unease. Suddenly, in the light of his headlights, he noticed a figure waving on the side of the road. It was a person drenched to the bone. Jack pulled over and, feeling sympathetic, decided to give the hitchhiker a ride. The hitchhiker got into the car without a word and wrapped himself in an old, tattered coat. His face was hidden by a hood and only raindrops trickled from its edges. Jack asked him where he was headed, but got only a vague mumble in response. The hitchhiker pointed forward and the car started moving. Jack tried to make conversation to ease the tension. "Nasty weather, huh? Where can I drop you off?" "Just ahead," the hitchhiker rasped, without lifting his head. Jack continued driving, occasionally casting worried glances at his passenger. The hitchhiker didn't seem threatening, but something about him made Jack deeply uneasy. As they drove, Jack tried to engage his passenger in conversation, but received only monosyllabic answers or complete silence. The weather worsened, the road became increasingly treacherous, and the tension in the car grew. Jack suddenly noticed that his hands were trembling and decided to focus on the road to avoid an accident. Suddenly, the car came to a sudden stop. Jack turned around and saw that the hitchhiker was holding something in his hands. It was an old cloth stained with blood. Jack's heart pounded, and he felt a cold sweat on his forehead. The hitchhiker slowly lifted his head and looked directly at Jack for the first time. His eyes were empty and cold, like those of a dead man. Jack tried not to show his fear and asked calmly, "What is that?" "You need to know the truth," the hitchhiker whispered, pointing to the back seat. Jack slowly turned and saw that the back door of the car was ajar, and something was moving in the trunk. He cautiously got out of the car and approached the trunk. What he saw made him shiver with horror. In the trunk lay the body of a woman, covered in blood. Jack began to panic and frantically tried to decide what to do. He turned to the hitchhiker, but he had disappeared, as if he had evaporated into thin air. Jack didn't know how long he stood in shock before he could pull himself together and call the police. While he waited for the police to arrive, his mind was filled with horror and confusion. Who was this mysterious hitchhiker? And why had he chosen Jack? The police arrived quickly, but found no trace of the hitchhiker. It turned out that the woman in the trunk was a recent murder victim, and the mysterious hitchhiker might have been her spirit, trying to tell her story. Jack never drove on that road at night again, and every time he passed by, he remembered that dreadful evening that was forever etched in his memory. A few weeks later, Jack began to notice strange things. He felt like someone was watching him and heard strange whispers in his house. Sometimes he thought he saw the hitchhiker's shadow on the street. Fear and paranoia became his constant companions. Jack reached out to a local priest to bless his house and rid it of any possible curse. The priest listened to Jack's story attentively and agreed to help. However, even after the ritual, Jack continued to feel the presence of something sinister. On a warm summer evening, Jason, a young man in his early 20s, decided to hitchhike to another city to visit a friend. It was a spontaneous decision, and he hoped to save money by avoiding public transport. Standing by the side of the road, he held out his thumb, waiting for a kind driver to stop. After a few minutes, an old beat-up car pulled over, driven by an elderly man. Jason got into the car and thanked the driver, who introduced himself as Mr. Smith. They made small talk at first, discussing the weather and their destinations. Mr. Smith seemed polite and friendly, putting Jason at ease. "Thank you for picking me up. I didn't think anyone would stop." "No problem, young man. It's nice to have some company on the road." As they drove, the landscape changed from urban to rural, with vast fields and forests on either side of the road. Jason felt grateful for the ride and enjoyed the scenery. After an hour on the road, Mr. Smith's demeanor began to change subtly. His questions became more personal and invasive. So, Jason, do you often hitchhike alone? Sometimes. It's an adventure, you know. Mr. Smith's smile faded, replaced by a more serious expression. You should be careful. There are dangerous people out there. Jason nodded, feeling a slight unease. The conversation shifted to darker topics, and Mr. Smith started sharing stories about accidents and disappearances. You ever hear about the hitchhiker who vanished last year? They never found him. Jason's discomfort grew, but he tried to keep the conversation light. Yeah, I heard about that. Scary stuff. Suddenly, Mr. Smith turned off the main road onto a narrow abandoned path leading into a dense forest. Jason's heart raced, and he glanced around, realizing how isolated they had become. Mr. Smith, why are we going this way? Shortcut, Mr. Smith replied curtly, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. Jason felt a knot of fear tighten in his stomach. The trees closed in around them, and the sky grew darker. Mr. Smith started talking about his previous passengers, his tone becoming menacing. You know, not all my passengers have been as lucky as you. Some, well, they weren't seen again. Jason's fear turned to panic. He knew he had to get out of the car. The car slowed down as the path became rougher, and Jason saw his chance. He unbuckled his seatbelt and in a split second, opened the door and jumped out, rolling onto the dirt road. Jason scrambled to his feet and ran into the forest, branches scratching his face and arms. He could hear Mr. Smith shouting behind him, but he didn't look back. After what felt like an eternity, Jason emerged onto a different road, where he flagged down a passing car. The driver, a concerned middle-aged woman, picked him up and took him to the nearest police station. Jason reported the incident, and the police began an investigation, but Mr. Smith and his car were never found. The experience left Jason deeply shaken. He couldn't stop thinking about what might have happened if he hadn't escaped. The horror of that night haunted his dreams, and he avoided hitchhiking from then on. Whenever he drove past a hitchhiker, he felt a pang of fear and a reminder of the close call he had experienced. On one of the deserted roads late at night, a young driver named Tom was returning home after a party. He was tired and thought only about getting to bed. Suddenly, on the roadside, he noticed a solitary pedestrian raising a hand, asking for help. Tom decided to do a good deed and give him a ride. Tom stopped and invited the stranger into the car. The passenger got into the front seat and pulled his hood lower, hiding his face in the shadows. Tom asked where he was headed, but received only a vague gesture forward in response. The car started moving, and silence filled the cabin. Tom tried to start a conversation to ease the tension. Going far? Doesn't matter, the passenger replied, his voice muffled and strange. The longer Tom drove, the more he felt a strange tension. His passenger sat still, not making a sound. Tom glanced at him secretly and noticed that under the hood there was no face, no eyes, just emptiness. Tom decided to ignore it and kept driving. However, his sense of unease grew. He turned on the radio to lighten the mood, but the passenger suddenly turned it off. Don't. His voice sounded threatening. Tom began to feel that something was very wrong with this man. The road ahead seemed endless, and Tom didn't know how much longer he could enjoy the tension. The passenger suddenly turned to him and said, "Do you think you can get away?" These words made Tom shudder. He felt fear taking over him and decided to stop the car and kick the stranger out. But as soon as he tried to slow down, the passenger grabbed his arm, and Tom saw that instead of fingers, he had long claws. Tom broke free from the grip and stopped the car. He ran out, leaving the passenger inside, and felt panic setting in. But when he turned to look at the car, the passenger was already standing right in front of him. His face was empty without features. Tom started to scream and tried to run, but the passenger moved too quickly. He grabbed Tom and lifted him into the air. At that moment, Tom felt reality begin to distort. Everything around him turned dark, and he lost consciousness. When Tom woke up, he was in a hospital bed. Doctors told him that he had been found unconscious by the roadside, and there was no passenger in his car. Tom couldn't believe what had happened. He tried to explain what he had seen and felt, but no one believed him. Since then, Tom began to notice strange things. He felt like someone was watching him and heard strange whispers in his house. Sometimes he thought he saw the passenger's shadow on the street. Fear and paranoia became his constant companions. Tom turned to a local priest to bless his house and rid it of any possible curse. The priest listened to Tom's story attentively and agreed to help. However, even after the ritual, Tom continued to feel the presence of something sinister